Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be looking at the question: what does it mean to have love for country? In other words, patriotism and nation building. I want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. I want to welcome first Mr. Mohammed Sharif, a proud alumni of Waplo Institute. Mr. Sharif is FOL political analyst. Mr. Sharif, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's great to be here as always.
I also want to welcome Mr. Ahmed Salif. He's our planning and governance consultant. Mr. Salif is joining us from the Twin City. Welcome to FOL, my brother.
Thank you, Dennis, and it's a pleasure to be on with these esteemed co-panelists today.
Last but definitely not the least is FOL Chief Political Analyst who's joining us from Philadelphia, Mr. Wilmot Wetty Cooney. Mr. Cooney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. Always a pleasure to be here.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. Again, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing the question, patriotism and nation building. We're going to be looking at what really patriotism is, how does it help with nation building, what are some of the key ingredients, what are those values, who do we call a patriot? And we want to ask you to please share the show, invite a friend, and let's get started. Let me start with Mr. Sharif. Mr. Sharif, the question is patriotism. You know, I want to tell a story that I was in maybe second, third, fourth, or fifth grade, and we were discussing this question, and we had a brother-in-law who was in high school in Greenville, and he said, and we used to call it patriotism. He said, patriotism is one who loves his country and utilize it. So, Mr. Sharif, that was what I knew then. What is patriotism, and who do we call a patriot?
Yeah, so what you learned there is not far off the mark, right? So a patriot is someone who loves his or her country. Patriotism is a manifestation of love and devotion to your country. Patriotism is not a blind loyalty to a political institution. We're talking about country. So, when I think of patriotism, I think of, people in our past who rose and freed themselves of colonialism. So I can go to that example in a very clear way. You think of the freedom fighters from East Africa to West Africa, from North Africa to Southern Africa. You think of the resistance movement, the Mau Mau in Kenya. You think of individuals like Amilcar Cabral and the Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verdean resistance movement. You think of Ahmed Sékou Touré and the Guinean resistance that said no to France. You think of Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Bembela, Gamal Abdel Nasser, those patriots, African patriots who rose and freed Africa of European domination and European colonialism. So that was patriotism at its core. You talking about individuals who, despite everything, despite the dominance of the Europeans, said no, we're going to govern ourselves. This is our homeland. So those guys were patriots. So now what is going on in our times is that we are seeing a lot of disloyalty to our nation. Specifically, I'm going to cite Liberia, for example. You have individuals who, from time to time, get themselves established in the governmental structure, but they're not patriots, right? We have a party that carries the label a patriotic party, the National Patriotic Party of Liberia. The National Patriotic Party is the most unpatriotic party in Liberia, if not West Africa, because its foundation was based on murder, was based on economic terrorism. So that is not a patriotic party. You also have individuals who like I said, working government, they're not patriots. They claim that they are patriots, but they are not. They are only interested in their pocketbook. They're only interested in their pockets. So you cannot have a genuine national development without patriotism. That's all that I can say. That's, those are some of the things that I can say about patriotism,
Thank you.
because it's so very important that patriotism is married to national development. So to have national development, you have to have patriotism. It's impossible to develop your country without patriotism. You see the
Thank you.
example. You see
Thank
the
you, Mr.
example
Sharif.
of
We're
what's
going to
going
go
on.
deep into it. We're going to go deep into it. Let me bring in Mr. Sharif here. Two words I heard repeatedly going up, and it's good that Mr. Sharif mentioned that because we hear these words being thrown around a lot. National Patriotic Party, National Patriotic Forces of Liberia, United Liberation Movement, or Liberia Peace Council, and all the different things. Two words that I heard repeatedly going on: patriotism and nationalism. First, let's start with patriotism. What is it and how is it different or similar to nationalism?
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Mr. Sherry, for that expansive characterization of patriotism and a patriot. And then I know I will draw on some of those concepts. Patriotism comes from the word patriot or compatriot. Compatriot is the noun for people together, those who belong in the same place. So the idea that you have such an attachment to a place or to an ideal that obligates you to love that ideal, to love that place. It's a sense of belonging. It's about integrity. It's about dedication to promote, to protect, to ensure the growth and the maintenance of the sanctity of that thing. Now, there are words, the root words that we want to talk about when you hear national, nation state, a country. These are very different concepts. Sometimes they're similar, they're reinforcing each other, but a nationhood is not the same as statehood. It's not the same as country. It's not. It could be sometimes analogous to one another, but they are quite different. So patriotism is tied to that. So, for instance, you have a nation of people who are not necessarily from the same country. A nationhood could mean people who have the same or similar ethnic orientation, similar ancestry. So, for instance, you can have a nation of Native Americans here in America, different kinds of them. And the Mandingo Nation, for instance, is not just in Liberia or Guinea or another country, or Fulani Nation for that, or the Kran Nation for that matter. And so then there are, that begs the question, so then what is a country or what is the state, right? So statehood has some legality, it has political connotation and orientation. So that brings us back to the concept of patriotism. Then someone can be patriot because they're very ideological about their belonging. They're ideological about their ideals and their belief and their belonging, where they come from, the people that they're part of, what constitutes their identity. That makes them to want to sacrifice for that place, for that ideals, or for that matter, for that country. If it becomes a country, because country can be a people, or a place can be a country when it has some political connotation to it, as I said earlier, or even legal. So when you talk about sovereignty, there's a convention, it's a very old convention before World War II in 1933. I think it's called the Montevideo Convention in Uruguay, where they define statehood in two respects. They define statehood in political respect and define statehood in legal respect. So they say you become a state if you have a people and a defined territory, a population, and a territory that you can control. All right, and you are then able to establish a government to provide services to that people and that population. That is the country. You do not have to be recognized by other countries to exist as a country in that respect. However, in the legal definition, there's a concept called sovereignty, which is attached to countryhood or nationhood, right? Whereby you have to have been recognized, declare your independence, for instance, like Liberia did, and be recognized by other powers in other countries, and have all the elements in the political countryhood that then you have in the legal spot, that you are able to establish relations with other countries and other peoples, that you are able to control your own territory. You can defend your territory. That's the concept of sovereignty. That then that you are able to provide a government, provide housing, for instance, transportation, healthcare, and so on. So patriotism really comes from a place where one wants to maintain a place of belonging, a people which one belongs to, and the sacrifices that one makes to make that place a better place for their kinds, or for people who participate in that nationhood. There are other concepts along the show. We can talk about the concept of citizenship, because they're not the same, right? You can be a citizen of a country, but you're not really a member of that nation, for instance. So I'll stop there. It's a matter of introduction, and let Mr. Kunin weigh in, and then we can circle back to some of these concepts later on.
Thank you. Mr. Kunin, patriotism, we hear, we define it as love for country. And sometimes it's difficult to put a finger on what really this means. So, Mr. Kunin, what is this love for country, and what are some of the ways we demonstrate patriotism or love for country?
Well, I want to first of all say thank you to my two brothers here. They actually did justice to the definition of patriotism. And before I go there, I something I wanted to say the last time we were together. I just want to say it. Since we're talking patriotism, Mr. Moderator, I want to give a shout out to your own sense of patriotism to this show. Not only to the show, but to the network that you started, Focus on Liberia. I'm really impressed by, your hiring decisions, your recruitment decisions. Even though we don't necessarily agree with one another, but over time you've had a sense to recruit well-meaning Liberians to come to this show to talk to our people. The recruitment of Mr. Sharif, our sister Call, and now the addition you have here, Mr. Salim, I think he brings a lot to this table. And I just wanted to give a shout out to you. I think those are some of the things that reflect the general concept of patriotism. If you love something, you go all out, you do everything you can do to promote that thing, to ensure that thing has all of the best attributes. So, like I said, definitionally, Sharif and Salif, they've provided us a good information. Love of country is the elementary definition of patriotism. If I may add, it's that expression of pride that one has for their country, that expression of attachment that one has for their country, that feeling of belonging. So you got a love, you got the attachment, you got a pride. All of these things contribute to the whole general concept of patriotism, and it can be expressed at different levels. In many ways. For example, real patriots, they try to show love for their country by being good citizens. What are some of the ways we can be good citizens? By respecting the laws of the nation, by adhering to the laws of the nation. That's one way of being a patriot, by respecting your own country laws. The other way you can express patriotism is to love the things that your country produce, your culture, our music, the way we dance. These are all elements that we can find attachment to. These are all elements that we can love. The places we go, the food that we eat, all of these things, they come under patriotism. It reflects where we're from. It reflects the pride that we have for where we're from. It reflects the pride we have in our culture. So these are many ways that we can express patriotism, our commitment to public service. How committed we are to public service. What do we really take public service to be? Is it a venture to get rich, or is it a venture to promote the lives of our fellow citizens? Now, the key word here in the definition here is love. And we all know here that none of us here can injure something that we love. We love our children. We don't go destroying them. We love our families, our wives. We don't steal from our wives. We don't steal from our children. So expression of patriotism go that when you love your country, you don't steal from your country. When you love your country, you don't do things that are injurious to your country. Everything that you do as a patriot are things that are in the direction of advancing your country, of promoting your country, of promoting your people. So it is not just love in a vacuum. It's not just the love of the physical space that constitute the country. It's the love of the people. To the point where you're not only thinking about sending your own children to school, but thinking about the other children of the country. So, I mean, these are other ways that people, that we can, when we see patriots, we know them. So the satisfaction is not only because you have food on your table. The satisfaction is not only because you have the ability to send your kids to the best schools. The satisfaction is not even because you're able to wear the best of clothes. But the satisfaction comes from the fact that you are providing these opportunities across the board for every member of your society. Like in a family, if you love your children, you don't get set up by you going out and eating in your stomach for the children hungry. No patriot should do that, and no patriot can do that. You're not patriotic when your stomach full and other people hungry. Patriots don't go that way. That's not love. That's not love. So we will be able to examine some of these things.
Yeah.
And as it relates to Liberia, the discussion of patriotism, in my opinion, I think it will give us some understanding as to our current level of development. Because nobody loves a country and keep the country stagnant the way we've kept our country over the decades. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif, let me come to you. One of the greatest teachers ever lived is Jesus Christ. And he gave an example or a commandment, say, if you love me, keep my commandments. And I believe most of our holy books will say something in that direction. Mr. Kony is saying you can be patriotic and steal from your country. And so build on that and tell me, because when you listed people that were patriotic, these were all people in the past who were fighting for the liberation struggle. How can a regular citizen, just like my cousin in Dunwicken, how can a regular citizen in Monrovia or somewhere there in Sanquin or in Paye demonstrate patriotism?
First, let's start with those in authority, right? We
We'll
can
come to
start.
them. We want to start with the regular citizens.
Yeah, but gleaning, if you glean from what Mr. Cooney said, and just to add up to Agnes' point as well, is that if you love your country, you cannot steal from your country. That is absolutely correct. Now, so the problem is, as leaders, I know we can start from the bottom up, but development in Africa, I will argue that development in Liberia specifically, I want to limit I want to be specific to Liberia. Development in Liberia has to start from the top down. It has to be a top-down approach. On this platform, some time ago, I gave an example of a president of the Republic of Liberia who went around to communities, the Mandingo community, and encouraged the Mandingo parents to send their kids to school. He said that, from what was related to us, that there will come a time that this country will belong to the educated people. Send your kids to school. So this president identified a community, identified a social problem in the Liberian nation state, and went to the problem and discussed with these people and told them and urged them that I have made education free. I have made public education is free, and there's school meals now. So you don't have to be afraid to send your kids to school. Please send your kids to school. He pleaded with the Mandingo people. And as a result, we are products of those campaigns. That's patriotism. The president of whom I speak is William R. Tolbert Jr. That is patriotism. So this is something before his execution, before his demise. This is a campaign that he launched, and we are products of that today. What would have happened if my father or my uncle didn't say, "Oh, the president told us to do this"? You know how powerful that office is for the president to go to a community and identify a problem and say, "This is what we're going to do. This is what I urge you to do." That is patriotism. So, in terms of corruption, if the government is not setting example, individuals are also going to look the other way. Our friends are going to look the other way. Your relative in Deduoken is going to look the other way. They're going to say, look, the superintendent is doing this anyway. You know, the man sitting up there asked me to bring a gift to him to get a job, for example. So if your brother or your cousin in Deduoken who, for example, apply for a job, a teaching position, and the superintendent wants him to bring a bribe, what is he going to do if he needs a job? He's going to try to find something, as we say in our Liberian colloquial, something for him to get the job. That is not patriotism on the part of that official of government. So from the top down, those individuals at the top of the leadership ladder have to set example, and this starts with the president. The president has to come out in a way that we've never seen before. When I say the president, I'm actually now referring to the office of the presidency. I'm referring to the occupant, the occupant of the executive mansion. It has to start there. It has to start with the leadership, the incorruptible leadership that would preach that will preach justice, that will preach fairness, that will preach rationality and not theft. But what do we see time and time and again? So after elections, you have elected officials. The first thing that they do, they are so anxious to get rich quick. What do you think the ordinary men and women in the street of Monrovia, the ordinary men and women in the street of Greenville, of Harper, of Deadwood, and wherever they are, what are they going to be thinking? Because the leaders are not setting good examples. And because the leaders are not setting good examples, it is very important, and I will hope that we get into this more. It is very important that the leaders set this example of patriotism. You cannot develop your country if you're stealing from your country. I absolutely agree.
So Mr. Sharif, just let me interject. So you're saying if the ordinary person in Dulukan is corrupt, or is being corrupted by the superintendent, in other words.
Yes.
So he's excused for being unpatriotic. In fact, you don't even blame him for being unpatriotic because someone else caused it.
He is not entirely excused or recused, but here is the issue. So where do you go to, where is your reference point? Where do you go to seek redress? We hope that we will go to the authority to seek redress. But if the authority is corrupt, there is no hope. There is no transparent judiciary in Liberia at this time. So if the ordinary man is engaged in a level of corruption, for example, in the school system, if a teacher is encouraging the purchasing of buying grades, like, encouraging students to buy grades, or or trade grades for sex, that is a crime. That is criminal. But if it's not punished by the public official responsible for that teacher, if it's not punished by the school authority, that stuff is going to fester. And this happens all of the time. Everywhere you are, every ministry that you look at now, theft is something that is really stylish. It's just, it's really fashionable now to steal. If you don't steal, then you don't know what you're doing. And that has to stop. So the development of Liberia will depend on how patriotic we are, and it starts from the top down.
Thank you. Mr. Salih, let me hear your thoughts on that, on what the ordinary person can do to demonstrate patriotism. What are some of those things? Or are we just helpless in the hands of the almighty leaders? If they are corrupt, we too will be corrupt, and because there's no redress, according to Mr. Sharif, even though we can be held accountable, but leaders are really, you know, the ones to blame.
Well, I would set sometimes I tend to be academic in these discussions because what you see in the literature, if you translate that into practice, and that's how things have been, right? You see a model in one country that sometimes is transplanted to another country, or at least is modified and adapted and brought to another country. If we look at recent trends in, let's say, international development, for instance, and look at countries that have developed or have failed to develop, on two extremes. So we look at Somalia in 1990s, horrible civil war erupted. Mohammed Farah and the United States went in and tried, and they didn't succeed. They extricated themselves, right, and left Somalia in chaos. So this day, Somalia is still in chaos. Somalia has not been able to develop. We can look at a number of factors. And then you look at post-World War II, West Germany and Japan. So these two countries, following the Marshall Plan, those are the countries that are called the 82nd Airborne Development, where military comes in, the country participates in war, and they come, so let's reconstruct this country. Germany was able to they put institutions in place, government in place, a functional, competent government in place, and foster a culture of citizenship. By that I mean citizenship has rights and obligations. You as a citizen, you have rights, but you also have obligation to contribute to your country, to love your country, and sacrifice for your country. That the literature say was fostered by the culture of the German people and the assistance they got to develop their country. So to Japan was totally a country that was destroyed during that war, and they were able to pick up. And then in more modern time, we look at Bosnia, what happened in the Balkans. They've not been able, because the ethnic factors, right? There are various factors that underline these things, right? Whether it's religious or ethnic, what are the factors that are really driving the individual decision to respect the rules, to respect the law, and be responsible citizen? Is it a sort of ethnicized society? Is it a religious theocracy that's driven in the culture of the country, right? And then quickly, we see East Timor, right? And then we look at South Sudan, for instance. East Timor, they made a decision that, when we broke up from Indonesia, we got all this help, international attention from the United Nations. We're going to put a government in place and orient our citizens towards responsibility on the part of the citizens, but also transparency and responsibility on the part of the leaders who are making the policy decisions. I'll conclude with this one country where people always reference. You look at Singapore, a sort of island city-state a nation. When they gained their independence in 1965 from Malaysia, it was a very abrupt. They became a nation very abruptly. It wasn't planned, right? What did they do? The founding prime minister, Lee Kuan Yew, what did he do? He said, listen, citizenship will be based on obligations of citizens to contribute to work towards developing a country. How the citizens do that, they will feed into this national policy of development. They pay attention to housing, because you can't have workers if they have nowhere to stay. They pay attention to feeding and healthcare. And then they tackle the big public investment. They tackle the big capital investment to modernize the place and build a country. The people realized they were under obligation to respect the law. They were under obligation to contribute. They were under obligation to exercise citizenship with responsibilities, but more with obligations. What we see in our context is a culture that we don't quite understand, whether we're an ethnic side society or whether it's a religious overly religious sort of theocracy, even? Or what is it that we hold onto as Liberians? That one thing that unites us, that one thing that motivates us to say, sacrifice to country, obligation to country, responsibility, responsible citizenship. At the same time, on the other hand, what is the policy that's driving all of this? Is there a systematic, an organized, competent government, national government that exercises policy options, proposes policy options that benefits the country, the people at all levels? So this thing is not just, oh, this the individual citizen has to one day decide I will be law abiding, because this is something that you get sort of socialized with, coming from the national leaders, the political leaders. And then you look at other factors, the religious institutions, the cultural institutions. So what are those magnets? Is it religion? Is it our tribes? Is it our tribal nations that really holds people together? In Liberia, that is confused. You look in the literature, people who have studied Liberia, anthropology, the Liberian studies people, the Liberia studies people, they can't really quite tell you what holds this nation state together. Is it the fact that one group came from overseas, or is it the fact that one group met another on the shores and there's not been that cohesion, that social cohesion? That therein lies the problem. Somewhere there's a puzzle we haven't been able to unpack.
And there way I was going with my second question, but you said you were going to be academic, and you really went academic on me. So let me ask you. Let's use the Lee Kuan Yew example. So explain to me what you are saying is number one, the leaders should be the one to set the agenda. There should be this one central thing that everybody surround themselves around for the country. In Liberia, we don't have that because the leadership did not set that up, or the leadership did not have one or ideology for us to rally around, or this central theme, this central value. So we cannot hold the citizen responsible because nobody told them to be patriotic. Explain to me clear terms without being academic.
Well, okay, I'll try not to be academic. Our historian hasn't joined us yet because it's a historical piece there. Unfortunately, our foundation is problematic. Our foundation is problematic. So we had nations in a place that became known as Liberia later on, these ethnic traditional nations that existed. They had relations that earlier on I defined statehood and nation state. Then that was the reason why I did that, right? And there was a Condor Confederacy in the West, in the Southwest. There was the King Massacre in Cape Manway, and the Bassas, Nicola. There were all these nations that were coexisting and having relations with one another, right? And then you had this project that came from overseas, that the people who were in our territory weren't aware of. One day they just saw this ship that arrived and brought people that looked like them, but who spoke something different that they didn't understand. That has never really worked out well, for that cohesion to happen today. We may disagree with it, we may I don't know, politicize and tribalize it and even religiousize it, but therein lies the problem. This group that arrived came from traumatic the situation, and they're trying to find themselves, to redefine themselves, to be able to determine their own liberty. And that's why they were focusing. And then they met some people there, they didn't quite understand them. They didn't quite understand the depth of the importance of these different relationships among these different ethnic communities. These ethnic communities, they were not always united all the time. Of course, we have history tells us there were different types of wars that existed. So in my view, and from what I read, we've struggled to identify a particular cultural touch point, that unites us as the people that creates that social cohesion. One. Secondly, as a result of that, the type of government that we've always operated, it has been a government of a sort of a welfare state government system where the state takes care of the few families that are running the show, right? As a result, everybody else wants that because it wasn't a government that cultivated sort of industrialization, cultivated, really nation and state building to say from the ground up, private sector, let's build and expand something to the economy, people can thrive and succeed. That didn't happen. everyone in Liberia to this day, government public sector job is the most prestigious job you can get. You have to have a title. You have to have been some kind of minister. You have to have run for some political office in order for people to respect you. We've talked about this in different arenas. So there's a problem that that sort of government is not able to really devise competent, well thought out policy options that benefit the people in a selfless way, because by and large it's a rent seeking system, and we haven't been able to debunk that. We haven't been able to deconstruct that in order to reconstruct ourselves as a people.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney, and we'll come to these ideas later, because what I'm hearing from Mr. Sharif and Mr. Salif is they are not saying much of patriotism from Liberia because leadership is not setting the agenda. What's your take?
Well, I mean, I agree in some respect to some of the points made, but I differ in other areas. I believe that patriotism, like other values system, yeah, there are individuals that can be born with uh, characteristics of patriotism, but also it's something that we can learn. Like other behavioral things, people can learn to be patriotic, and that goes to some of the areas Salif touched on. But for example, every society has what we call our agents of socialization. We have our churches, we have our schools, we have our religious, we have our mosques. Then at the root of it, we have family. The question is, what are we teaching our children? You know, who is telling a Liberian child that, look, it is wrong for you to steal? Who is telling a Liberian child that you have to show love for your community, and the way you do that is for you not to put trash all over the place? Where is the citizenry getting the training? I understand that the government is the most coercive institution in a society, like whose activity can impact a lot of impact the entire society. But the question is, what is our individual responsibility? Because even the individuals that we criticize in government, they come from the society. They didn't just jump to be in government. They were members of our churches. They were members of our mosques. They were members of our student group. They were members of our Masonic temple or our local societal groups. This is where they come from. So the question is, what are these institutions teaching our people? What are they teaching them about love of country? What does love of country mean to them? What are the values they are impacting to them? I'm not going to go on a high academic plane. True to my grassroots credential, I will keep it simple. The American people here, the love for America is something that is part. I mean, children from early on get to know what the American flag means. They get to know the important holidays in America. They get to know these things, what it means to be an American. Who is teaching our children what it means to be a Liberian? What is the quality of civic education that we give our citizens? How to be better citizens, how to take care of public property, how to take care of public offices. Who actually tell our citizens that it's okay for you to cheat in school? So we're talking about issues of honesty, we're talking about integrity. All of these things are part of patriotism. Where are we learning these behavior from? Is it a government that come and decree them? Or is it something that already in us, and then we'll go to government and manifest them in government? And my favorite example, look at the University of Liberia. The University of Liberia, they always describe themselves as the macrocosm of the Liberian society. On the campus of that university, you have the most critical elements of society. They criticize government. They have the answer to all of the problems of the society. But what happened to the graduates when they leave the walls of the university? What do? How come the university been there for all these years? We have not had leaders coming from the university to transform our country. So yes, you can blame government because again, it is a policy issue, but the ordinary citizens, our our educational institutions, our religious institutions, they all bear responsibility into the kind of citizen that is produced.
Thank you.
You know, and quickly before I close on the policy thing, you know, we keep and the other day we were talking about Bogue, we make examples of all these countries that are rich in their system, that are rich in their practices, that led to their development. And my question I keep asking, the system was not donated to them. That's the educated people that put these things together to work for the country. So the question is, what is our educated class doing? What is the technocrats doing? What are the politicians doing? These are the people that make other societies better. And when the ordinary people don't see policies and other things that reflect the betterment of their life, that when they can ask that bowl we eat. So the issue is related to the same question. Who is teaching us patriotism? What lesson are we learning?
Thank you. Mr. Sharif, the values or those attributes, those characteristics of a patriotic citizen, we talk about integrity, we talk about hard work, selflessness, you know, where do these things come from in the society? How are they formed and how are they sustained?
The value of hard work. I will give you a personal example. I was a real young child. I don't know if I even knew my mom when my father dispatched me to stay with my uncle. I mean, traditionally, this is what we do. It's not unusual, and I had the best of training from this man. He taught me hard work. He taught me honesty. My mom taught all of us generosity, you know, and the rest of that. My father taught us hard work. And so when we enrolled in school, we didn't eat our school fees. We went right to work. I mean, we studied hard, you know, and we came out very well. And so at the root, you already had that foundation. And so on a personal level, I can speak to that. But collectively, what I'm saying here is that generally, when you have the leadership that is condoning corruption, and corruption is fancy. What is the ordinary person in the street going to say? What are they going to think about? Right. So I know patriotism is not just about corruption. You can, as a leader, you can choose to work with someone even if you disagree with them or her, even if she or he disagreed with you. That's patriotism. In this leadership, we don't see a lot of opposing voices. You need to have that in the system, right? And the other thing I always talk about, corruption, right? It's not only fancy, government is enticing. Government is too, government employees are too well off. They are too comfortable. That's not how public service is supposed to be. Public service, if you're serving the public and you are wealthier than the ordinary people, right, then there is a problem. It's a problem. Uh, Mr. Coney talks about, you know, students from the University of Liberia. I went to the University of Liberia. One of the reasons why when university students come out of LU and they go right in the system and they become part of the system, it's because there is a system built for it. You have to get into government to become somebody, right? When you get into government, you are somebody. Just fight to get into, you know, the Ministry of Commerce, the Foreign Ministry, the Finance Ministry, the National Port Authority. So seek you first, you know, the jobs and all these things will be added onto you. That has to stop. As long as you have that system in place where public employees are better paid than everyone else, you're going to have a whole bunch of unpatriotic people who enter government. Then it's our own friends that leave here and go to Monrovia and talk about how they're going to serve their country. When they get there, what do? They're not serving country. Some of them, or most, if not most of them, it's about job. It's not about, I'm going to serve my country. So it has to stop. The government is a corporate here in terms of, this idea of, a big government. We have a very massive government in Liberia. We have a government that's top heavy. We have a government that's well paid. People are well paid. I just saw a list that went around on social media. And when you see that, I don't know, I didn't study the authenticity of it, but when you look at that, the wealthiest people in Liberia, when you look at the top 5, are people who are connected to government, including the president and vice president of the Republic of Liberia. They are multimillionaires. Jewel Howard Taylor, who would
Mr. Sharif,
think? Who would have thought that Jewel Howard Taylor is a multimillionaire? What did she do to get to be a millionaire? What has she done? She has not done anything, right? But theft. These guys. So what is going on is people are looting the country, and they're allowed to loot. It's very unpatriotic, and it's very, it's as I'm talking.
Mr. Sharif, let me stop you for a minute. The values that you learn, living with your uncle, with your father, your mother,
Yes.
those things that made you patriotic. Are you saying once you get into government, those dissipate because government now set up a system that erodes everything that you have learned as a child, as an adult?
I can personally assure you, Dennis, I can assure you that if I am in government, I don't know if it will happen because, people like us are not fashionable. We're not needed, right? If I am in government, maybe I lose my job the next day. If I'm a minister, maybe I lose my job in a week. Maybe, right? Because I am going to do the right thing. And the right thing is not fashionable.
Right.
Look, I was
So
around.
so you're saying we have patriotic citizens that enter government. Once they enter government, they're no longer patriotic because government has this system that does not reward integrity, and all the good things a patriotic citizen. And that's why, is that what you're saying?
That is correct. I was around when Chair Chippo did the right thing. Chair Chippo I don't agree with him, in antebellum Liberia, all of the things that, he was doing and so on and so forth up to the coup. I don't agree. But when he became Chief Justice of the Republic of Liberia, Chair Chippo did one thing that I came to know about. And actually, at his impeachment trial, which was a kangaroo trial, I was at the Temple of Justice that day, right? So he tried to do the right thing. But what was his reward? He was stripped of his position. So this is how our society rewards you. George Weah, how does George Weah how does he reward his people that are engaged in theft? He keeps them. He keeps them around so that they can do more, so that they can steal more. The more they steal, the more, they stay around him. The more they praise singing, the more they stay around him. That is an unpatriotic thing to do. What do you think the child growing up in Dedokan is trying to do? What do you think the child growing up in Kalipo or Ganta or Vonjem, what do you think that child is learning? What virtue is that child learning?
So Mr. Sharif, before I go to Mr. Kony, so those who are not in government, how are they demonstrating patriotism?
So those who are not in government. So if you're not in government, one of the things that those who are not in government, this is what we're doing right now, is a patriotic duty. I know of an education specialist, Dennis, and I agree. I couldn't agree with Mr. Coney more that you draw all these talents around. I know of an education specialist, CC Goya in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. This guy, I'm very impressed with him every time he comes on. So this guy is an education specialist. How is our government not calling on him to help with the rotten curriculum in Liberia? How is CC Goya not in Monrovia right now, working as a consultant, helping to fix our rotten education system in Liberia?
Mr.
How
Kuni.
is our government not calling people? Okay, some of them whom are on this platform. How is the government not calling them to fix the rotten infrastructure? Because you know what, they're not interested. They either don't know what they're doing, and it's lack of patriotism, a lack of vision. When you don't have a vision, you're not patriotic. You know what?
Thank
I
you.
named, Amilcar Cabral and all these people, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, and all these people, right? They were farsighted. They were farsighted. They saw something and they worked towards it. If you're not farsighted, you're not going to work towards it. These guys
Thank you.
just look at now what they're getting now. The millions and millions and millions of dollars that they amass is all they're interested in.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif, or Mr. Kuni. So the values that you talk about that were imbued into Mr. Sharif all the way in Kilipo, how are those sustained? And why do they disappear when people get in government? If we could agree with Mr. Sharif's assessment.
Yeah, Dennis, and let's keep the discussion in context. We're talking about patriotism, and we stipulated that, I mean, generally it means love of country, but you will also recognize that one element of patriotism that sometimes people refer to, mostly maybe in terms of war, is sacrifice. One element of patriotism is sacrifice. The sacrifice that you undergo for the general society to be better. I think that's one key component that is missing among us Liberians. How many of us are willing to sacrifice our comfort, to sacrifice our own peace of mind for the general welfare of Liberians? We all claim, we all see corruption, we all complain about corruption, but how many Liberians really want to institutionalize or to put up an infrastructure that will educate Liberians on the impact of corruption, that will provide civic education to Liberians on the responsibility of citizenship? The last time I saw that happening was in the 70s, when a group of Liberians looked at our political system and they said there was something wrong with the system, and they got together to conscientize Liberians to understand the system and make new decisions. We have a new situation in our country where even those who want to lead us, they don't want to make any sacrifice. Immediately they appear they want to lead. Nobody wants to educate our citizens. Nobody wants to conscientize our citizens. Nobody wants to talk to anybody about what it means to be to serve. That serving in public service is not for personal aggrandizement. No, everybody just want to lead. Everybody, I mean, they hate the country running for office. They hate the country running for office. Look, we have an imperial presidency in Monrovia. Nobody talk about the powers of the imperial presidency in Monrovia. Power is concentrated in Monrovia. That even it will shock you that even towns and villages that are close to Monrovia, places like Todi, they are cut off of development. When you talk about development in Liberia, it's Central Monrovia. That's what we've been talking about for decades. So what I'm saying is, nobody is making a sacrifice to lead a new generation that will be reoriented to what it means to love your country. No one is willing to make that sacrifice. So we keep cycling the wagon. We keep cycling the wagon, hoping that we will get better results. Until we can reach that level where we can teach. Look, Liberia is one of the countries that has no national service. So again, first of all, we got no definition of what it really means to be a Liberian. The kind of pride that other people refer to themselves, that look, I'm this, I'm an American, I'm a Nigerian, I'm a Ghanaian. What does it mean when we say we are a Liberian, that we are Liberians? How many of us embrace our culture, Dennis? They will laugh at me when I'm drinking palm wine, which is a traditional wine. They will laugh at me because I don't know the distinction between white Zinfandel and Merlot. Those who drink in the Zinfandel and the Merlot, they see themselves civilized. But my palm wine is portrayed as being country. This is where we are, Dennis. It is only lately that we've even embraced the traditional clothing. Before, those of you people that went to private school in Monrovia, it was a big shame for our parents to go to our school in their lapas. This is where we are. This is how we love our country. We don't even promote destinations in our country. Look, a patriot must first of all explore his country. Visit all the places of interest you have in your country before you start going to Dubai. But going to Dubai now is a badge of honor. You see, these are simple lessons in patriotism. I mean, I know the government got a role to play, but you ask for ordinary Liberians. Yeah. How many of us brag about going to Grand Cru or going to Maryland to that little island or going to the Batavi waterfall in Banga? No, we brag about going to Dubai. We brag about singing all the Western music. We brag about the kind of wine we drink. This is not love of country. This is not love of country. And until somebody can lead an effort to conscientize Liberians as to what it means to be Liberian, to begin to appreciate things that are Liberian, we are very much far from love of country.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, I don't know if you have, if you can respond to Kuni, but let me put something on there. I spoke with Professor K. Moses Namwe at one point, and this is something that he said. He said, values like integrity, like hard work, these are, he called them the crucibles by which a country thrives. So if we want to build a country, if we want to, for nation building, we need those values. And so, Mr. Salif, my question to you is, and you've already stressed that we don't have that central something to rally around, has something that make us Liberian. So if we say the love for Liberia, the love of country, those things that are supposed to demonstrate, where are they in our society now? Where do we get them from? How do we sustain them? And how do we show to people that, yes, we love Liberia, we are demonstrating it. I was in Nigeria, and they will always tell you, a country as great as Nigeria. If you go to Ghana, they say, we are the best in the whole wide world. If you go to Guinea, they say, this is Guinea, Sela Guinea. This is not Liberia, they will tell you. Right. Pride, love of country. Where do we see this in Liberia?
You know, it's a good, can you hear me okay, Dennis?
Yes, sir.
It's a good question. I mean, that's what I started pointing out when I said we have no cohesive sort of attraction for social and what political cohesion, whatever that may be for us. The problem we have is it's so I think so significant that we can't just begin from one dimension. For example, we could start by civic education in the schools, trying to change the culture, a massive public campaign, and by our institutions that Mr. Kooning pointed out, whether it's the BDA, the churches, the mosque, the society, so secret society institutions, but massive campaign to really socialize our people to the importance of loving yourself as a Liberian and loving your country. And so the question is, what's that one thing? What's that magnet? We welcome any culture. We go somewhere, we start. So right now in Liberia, when the reporters speak or you listen to the news, they're calling Liberia Liberia. They're pronouncing like as if they come from a British culture already. And one would say, well, during the war years, people were in different countries as refugee, and of course, you adapt, you come, you bring some trappings of some of those cultures. But the bottom line there is you have to have something that is totally 100% Liberian, and that thing could tie to your identity. It could be tied to your nationalism. Nationalism is not just a negative thing, where people say you're nationalistic, you love your country, you prevent other countries from benefiting in certain ways in which you want your country to benefit. Nationalism could also be very positive. It could be, something in this direction that we're talking about, whereby you begin with the citizens and try to educate them. And then you also begin to strengthen the integrity institutions in the truest sense of the word, not just some whitewash something, you put somebody there who is very corrupt already. Everybody know they lack integrity. Clearly that they're corrupt and they're engaging in acts cannot be characterized as high degree of integrity. And so when you start doing some of those things, arresting people, really punishing people, enforcing the rule of law, but then the people ask, well, how do you do that when the officials and the leaders themselves are accused of these vices, are accused of being corrupt, and some of them openly? They're not leading by example. So then it's difficult for anything to trickle down to the people. We may call on our institutions to try to be moral, to try to enforce morals, and try to, educate and promote civic learning and civic duty, responsible citizenship, in order to build a responsible citizenry. All of that's well and good. But if you don't have that model, Mr. Coney mentioned something very critical, that the family as that unit of society, right? That the family is the microcosm, it's a representative of how a society looks like. If you see the father is dishonest, engaging in dishonest practices, lying to protect something or to hide something, and the children are seeing that, they don't, we are a culture where we don't see any of those as a problem. In America, yeah, people, it's big deal. They say, oh, you lied. You say, oh, that's just a small lie. They say, no, you lied. It's just there's a big like a message in there. When I hear Americans emphasizing there, they say, you lied. You lied. And because you lie, how can I trust you? I don't trust you anymore if you can tell me something that's not true. And we do that in our culture without blinking our eyes because we don't see it as problematic. We think it's okay. So the point here is you promote civic education, encourage institutions to engage in massive campaigns. Uh, Again, if you don't have that leadership, you don't have that modeling of it, because children learn better by examples, by what they see. You have to model for them. The kids don't learn by hearing, they learn by seeing. And so if they see, all they see is a corruption, is stealing and dishonesty and laziness, and people now, you come to work 10 o'clock, you leave 1 o'clock, you go to lunch, you don't come back. Young people, university students who are on internship, they're working in your offices and they're seeing all these. What do you think they're going to plan to do themselves? They will model that behavior. They will model that behavior, and therefore the country is in trouble.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Sherry, my question to you and to all of you here is, I will throw out a few things here. Are Liberians generally patriotic? Are our leaders patriotic? Are citizens generally patriotic? Are Liberians in the diaspora patriotic? Or are they more patriotic than the ones in Liberia? Let's really, as we say in Liberia, bring it home now. How do we assess our level of patriotism as a people?
It's an excellent question, and I will cite you a few examples. I had a principal, a high school principal, by the name of William Reeves, and I remember, as young kids when we would go to campus, and my friend one day, a friend of mine and I went to the school to our campus, and no one was on campus, and we were the first two on campus that morning. The campus was empty, and we had a big campus, real a nice campus. So we started to make our way back to some place to get what we call in Liberia kala, to just eat something and come right back because we felt like we had time. So the principal was on his way, And he said, "Where you guys going?" We said, "Well, teacher, nobody on campus." And he laughed. He said, "What about you? You're somebody. So get back on campus." So he said, "Get back on campus." And this man was very, very punctual. This man was very, very punctual. I can't overemphasize that. So there are Liberians, ordinary Liberians, that have done the patriotic thing, but I would tell you why it hasn't paid off, and it doesn't pay. Dubanyan, that I mentioned on this show the other day, went back to Liberia and offered his services in the heat of a national emergency, in the heat of a healthcare emergency, and his offer was rejected. Right? He tried to do the patriotic thing, but his offer was never accepted. There are Liberians here in the diaspora, because you also asked about the diaspora, who are willing to go back and service their country. Their offers have been consistently turned down. I have heard that the former Minister of Finance have offered his services. Amara Kone has offered his expertise to the current minister. That has been turned down. There are individuals, uncountable number of people here in the diaspora who are willing to offer their services free of charge. That's been turned down. I'm sure, Dennis, if you are called upon to help in any way, shape, or form, I'm sure you will be willing. You are a patriot. I didn't just know you today. You will be willing to help that country. But have you ever been called upon to assist in any way whatsoever? So again, the pace setter of patriotism, the pace setter, I'm not sure if I can hear you. The pace setter of
Mr.
patriotism.
Shelby, what I was saying is we've seen time and time again that people leave the diaspora, and when they go back, man, they are building houses. They
Yes.
are the one who are saying, "Oh, this is our time now."
Yes.
What they couldn't do in America, sleeping with 16, 13 years old, I mean, it became a feast. So when you say people living here and they are going back, we've also seen the worst results from people
That's
coming from the
unfortunate,
States.
Yeah, that is absolutely unfortunate. And I'm not going to pretend as if that doesn't happen. It happens a lot. You see it. You see some guy that you knew somewhere in your neighborhood, or maybe that you just know in the Liberian community that you guys used to go to meetings and stuff like that. And the person says, "I'm going home now," and they go home, they land that job, that dream job of theirs. And the next thing they're doing, what are they doing? They're building mansions. And like you said, they're engaged in all sorts of immorality. They're sexually promiscuous, and they're doing all of the thing, all of the engagement, all of the vices that undermines, again, the development, the social and economic development of our country. So at some point, you look and see, but where can we grab this? Is this a runaway train? Can we just put our hands up and say, this can be solved? I'm not there yet. I'm not in that position. I don't know if I can get myself to come around to giving up. I'm not going to give up. I will offer a prescription, and the prescription is, together, the government and the non-governmental sector, everybody together, the opposition. We haven't even begun to talk about the opposition.
And that's where I want to go next, Mr. Sharif.
Right? I mean, so let's get there. Let's get there. Because,
let's get there. And Mr.
Right.
Cooney, the same question for you. And our friend Sam Wallow said this question is loaded. Let me put this. He said, "Dennis, those are loaded and leading questions set up to advance negative stereotypes." I don't agree with Sam, so I'll ask you, Mr. Cooney, anyway. Are Liberians generally patriotic? Our
Dennis, to be
leaders
honest with
patriotic?
you, I would say, look, the answer to that question is a mixed bag. Truly, there are Liberians in Liberia over the years, and even currently as we speak, that are patriotic, that are faithful to the country, that have love for the country, that have made sacrifices for the country, and have shown the willingness to make sacrifices for the country. And at the same time, there are a lot of Liberians that are patriotic. Again, I'm trying to keep within the context of the definition of patriotic: love for your country, do everything to advance your country. There are a lot of Liberians in Liberia that are not patriotic. They engage in behavior that bring the country down. They engage in behavior that rob the country of its potential. They engage in things that go against the unity of the country. There are a lot of Liberians in Liberia that engage that. And if you ask me in the diaspora, it's also a mixed bag. There are a lot of there are some Liberians that left the diaspora and went to Liberia to do their absolute best to carry the country forward. At the same time, there were some people that left from here, went to Liberia, and they were escorted from the executive mansion for corruption. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. You find individual brilliance, you find individual star here and there. And talking about people in the diaspora being patriotic again, let me give a shout out to my man, Emmanuel Sonnyboy Wetty. This is one Liberian that had demonstrated so much selflessness on something that he believed in, dual citizenship. And today we are all happy. Today the Senate has passed their version of the dual citizenship bill. And a lot of people don't know the personal sacrifices that Mr. Wetty put into that. They just see it, oh, the man that dual citizenship man, that dual citizenship man. So you have some flashes of patriotism both here and at home. But if you were ask me in terms of the aggregate character of our nation, we've been deficient when it comes to patriotism. Because if we were not deficient, we would not be where we are. Again, let's go to the institutions that I talk about. What did Masonic people, the people that are in the Masonic temple, what did they talk about governance in our country? You know, was it meant that the leadership of our country would be decided on Benson Street and imposed on the rest of the country that inhibited democracy for such a long time, that led us into war? What are the churches telling us about governance, about public service? When you see so many people that leave the churches, that end up in government, what are the Muslim institutions telling us? When you see so many people that leave the Islamic faith that end up in government, what are they telling us?
And Mr. Kunin, to your point, we even have a president now who I refer to as pastor in chief.
Yeah, and he's not the first pastor. You know, we've had several pastors.
Yeah. I agree.
So what are these institutions telling us? So in terms of aggregate national character, I would say that the country has been very deficient when it comes to love for itself. And most of the citizens have been deficient in that category. Despite the fact that we've had flashes of brilliance from individuals. You know, we can name Abba Pod, we can name several other people, we can name Toba Datipote, several other people. You know, and I mean, those are my heroes. And other people may have their own heroes, but those are my heroes.
Every patriot, Mr. Sharif, name besides Tukwanya is dead. But okay, he named two more. Sorry, Mr. Sharif. Let me come to you, Mr. Salif. What level of patriotism do we see in our own attitude as Liberians, in our speeches, in our activities, both in our leaders and our political leaders? And let me give you an example. Here at Focus on Liberia, we always talk about, when we are concluding our show, we played a song that says we are all Liberians, and we encourage Liberians to do whatever it takes to make our country a glorious land of liberty. Do you hear these things in the speeches our leaders make, starting with President Weah, Mr. Alexander Cummings, Councillor Tiawan Gonglo, Mr. Joseph Newman Boakai? I know Mr. Cummings the last time said, and he has repeated several times, we are a country, 172 years old, we are old, but we have nothing to show for it. I know he makes several statements like that. Mr. Boakai, his famous Bain Park, and, and all the different things that our leaders say, the speeches they make, the things they say publicly, and how do we see patriotism reflected in those speeches, in their attitudes, and in the way they conduct themselves? Mr. Salif.
Yeah, that's this is a sort of internally inconsistent question in and of itself, because I say that because when you hear our leaders, if you're just going by the words they use,
Yeah.
or the way they project, the presentation, how they dress, how they behave and treat people around them. Because now you're looking for indicators of patriotism. You're looking for indicators of love for country. That's really what you're asking. Um, you know, there's semblances here and there. You'll see Buckeye wear the safari, that top of suit all the time. If that's a symbol of life, because patriotism is also rooted in symbolism, right? Cultural symbolism, social symbolism, that brings people together. So it's important to have this conversation. But we are a very syncretic society. By that, anthropologists talk about when you borrow from a little bit of everywhere and bring it together and try to make one thing out of it, right? A Liberian can be 100% European, dressed today in that heat, scorching heat in Liberia, and they're comfortable in that suit, and they go around there fine. Next thing you know, they're wearing the vice shirt, they're wearing the Liberian traditional garb, whether it's from Lofa or it's from other parts of Liberia, Kipon and so on. Um, in terms of speech, it's very difficult to point to. I hear Buckeye, and that's a political mantra, it's a political sort of campaign jingle, right? Think Liberia, love Liberia, build Liberia. I've heard comments repeat that phrase you talk about. We're 170 something years old. We've been doing this one thing. We don't expect different results doing the same thing. Right? Is that patriotism? Maybe that's a political strategy. You see, listen, I'm the guy who can. I have ideas how to do it differently and get better and different results. That's what he's really saying. Is that being patriotic? I don't know, but I doubt it. That the intentionality behind it doesn't point to patriotism to me. The number of politicians you can think of, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, when she was there, she was accused of being very sort of a Western-centric president. She respected those Liberians who were educated from the West. She respected her relationship to the West and Western institutions, sort of some of that elitist hegemony, right? Whether it's herself or her children or people who have connections to the old elite Merkel class, all of those things. Is that patriotic? Is that Liberian? But at the same time, she was a president who also um, promoted all kinds of institutions that she thought would bring about integrity, that she thought would develop Liberia, would bring Liberia to a better and different place. So patriotism, like, sometimes is a construct, right? People play with it and say, well, it depends the context. It depends on what you need to do. This country was broken by self-destruction for many years, and you needed to take it from one point to another. That's an argument there. But to bluntly answer your question, honestly, I don't see that specific Liberianness when all Liberian presidents or officials or leaders speak. I don't see that. I don't hear that. When they dress up nowadays, it's what they call pro-pose suit. That's no Liberian cultural outfit. I mean, well, it's beautiful. I have one. You can wear it, but it's Nigerian culture. For crying out loud sake. It's Nigerian culture. See how we've embraced it. Everybody, you're in the government. If you don't wear the so-called proper suit, it means that you're not presenting well. You're not well dressed and so on, right? But that's Nigerian culture. And you go to Nigeria, the specific cultural symbols of the various nations, the Igbo nation, the Yoruba nation, the Hausa nation. They have certain outfit that they wear that is unique to them, ceremonials, certain specific rituals that identify, specifically point to these sub-nations in our country. Same thing, the Gambia. You go to Senegal, you can point to something. The Cote d'Ivoire, you can point to something. Guinea, they say the Sekou High. You can point to something. This fabric, this bazaar, they're all very culturally can be identifiable and attributable to a specific subculture or country, right? What do we have? Yes, in Lofa, the Kisi, the Bandi, they have their own cultural outfits. Everybody, the vice shirt is there. But how often do we wear that? We've kind of synchronized as we created some hybrid of that. so that now people, they tell us they're making more Nigerian style, and we embrace that. That's the thing of the day. Liberians are very trendy people, not carrying themselves, their own identity with those trends. So that's problematic. We need an overhaul of our own mindset, of how we think about ourselves, our country, and so on.
Thank you. Let me bring in our first caller here to join the discussion. This is a caller, your name and where you calling from. Yes, volume, please. Hello, go ahead. Give it a little volume, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. This is Abdullah Kane. I'm calling from Pennsylvania. My concern on the topic of patriotism, as you ask the question whether Nigerian we are actually patriotic or not, or whether people explore are patriotic more than the own Nigerian. What we say in short is Liberians, we are actually loving, we love one another, but we are not actually patriotic, because if we are patriotic, we cannot take money from Liberia and carry it in the developed world. Instead of taking it from the developed world, carrying it to Liberia and go and build our country, but rather our politicians are taking it from that, carrying it to the developed world. That is not patriotic, because if you choose to be a patriotic citizen, meaning you should love your country. Patriotism means love.
Thank you.
Full true expression that your country, you actually love your country to your heart. You love your country to whatever extent. You not only love your country by your mouth, that I love my country, or I speak like Liberian, or I have the culture of Liberia, I know. Well, you should love your country for whatever condition or whatever sector that you find yourself within. Let them for instance of every sector now in Nigeria, everything is broken because of corruption, from the top to the stool, and not only from the leadership of the government, but now you find it everywhere that's the janitor. They are not patriotic now.
Thank you.
Everybody carrying on the corruption. So the corruption today has become a date of end of the issue of the day today in Liberia. It has made, because the leadership are in the corrupt institution, it makes for even the local people, everybody not practice. Even if you don't want to practice it, you just have to. Not a single area you go to, they obtain a single paper without you running up and down and spend double of the money that you should pay for that service.
Yeah.
Because they have high level of corruption. And another thing is, if you go for a paper in Liberia, now people are not going to even serve you unless you practice. This even has served another patriotism. We really need to love our country, and we have to practice that kind of, and practicing.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you so much. And this is your first time. We really appreciate your call. Thank you. Let me go to my next caller here. Your name and where you calling from?
Thank you so much, Mr. John. This is Elvis. I'm calling from Minnesota.
Elvis, you're using different phones, so we can't tell anymore.
My new number is
Go ahead quickly.
Yes, quickly. I just want to say, in Liberia, we have a lot of patriotism. We do, but it's focused in the wrong areas. I will go back quickly to during the Civil War time. You remember almost every tribe in our country had a defense force. Everybody feel only connected to the tribe and only feel a sense of loyalty and patriotism to their individual tribes. So wherever a Liberian defense force, where some group of people came together and said, regardless of whatever tribe this person is, we're going to defend any Liberia that is coming in harm with? No, we did it because of individual tribes. So tribalism is the best patriotism we have in Liberia. Most people only are loyal and feel a sense of connection to their tribe. So we need a patriot in chief. I think Mr. Sharif was saying something similar. I think most of the panelists were saying that. In this race right now, we have one person who most of us can point to as being a true patriot in Liberia. That is Mr. Bongo. I want to say Bongo. He's showing his patriotism, even when taking tribal lines. You know, Prince Johnson kidnapped that man because he worked with Emma Sawyer and helped him during the time in Caldwell. He didn't go to Prince Johnson and say, because this is my kids now, go on inside simply because we're from the same continent and the same tribe. Chancellor cut that man, beat him, and humiliated him. He didn't go there because Johnson was supported by his tribesmen. There's a true patriot who is an advocate for the right thing in Liberia. That's why we need to rally around him. Most of us on this platform, we love the show. Most of us in the diaspora, we're patriots. We understand what it means to be patriots. But the reality is, how many of us are looking at one candidate and say, you know what, regardless of what financial needs he has or don't have, we need to rally around this person and push him forward. We're not doing that. We look at other people, we don't see the kind of character like Mr. Bungler has. So thank you again for taking my call. I appreciate it. We can rally around him. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a pitch there for Mr. Councilor Gonglo. Let me get my last caller here, and that's Jimmy Eastman. Jimmy, you're live.
Hey, John, very good show again. I really appreciate your panel guests, especially the first time hearing Mr. Sirleaf expound like that. But what he was alluding to sounded more like an identity crisis. And it's unexpected because Liberia, of course, we were of that diverse tribe. Then we had this other group, settler group, come with foreign, westernized ideas. Okay? So we are people of different cultural heritage. And that's who we are. But before we can become patriotic, I believe this wholeheartedly, we must espouse virtue first, honesty, integrity, treating each other fairly without regard to tribe. If we don't espouse the cardinal virtues that make up a true patriot, I mean, dying for country is one thing, but you also have to die for good cause.
Thank you.
So I think it is also has to be resonating in our youth that virtue is what we should pursue and love of country. That's my contribution today.
Thank you, Jimmy. We have more callers here, but let me go back to my panel quickly. 1 minute each to respond to our callers. And Mr. Cooning, before you start, I have a comment here for you. Tugba Sapolucia. I saw the Tugba, so I thought that was your friends, the Tugba brothers in Philadelphia. But this person said, I'm willing to come on the platform to express my unbiased opinion. I have no political affiliation, unlike Mr. Cooning, who unapologetically support this government. This is unpatriotic, I believe. Mr. Cooning, respond to our callers, and also that you can respond to our caller. Please, 1 minute. Let's go around the room. You heard the callers. Let's do that. Starting with Mr. Cooning.
So, according to the logic of that writer, as soon as I cease my support for this government, then I'm patriotic. You see the logic? That's the kind of logic. I'm not patriotic because I support the government. As soon as I stop the support for the government, all of the sudden I become patriotic. These are the kind of dangerous mentalities that we should be watchful against. We should all strive to belong to a country where we love our country, we support the constitution of our country that guarantees freedom of association. Every Liberian is free to affiliate with a political party. And I really don't think that we should criminalize or we should attribute motive to a Liberian that wants to be a part of a political party. That's not patriotic. To criticize Liberian because they belong to a political party, that's the most unpatriotic thing that anybody can do.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, so what you heard, at least from I think Abdullah Konet made a point, and I'm not trying to crystallize this. There is this sort of a symbiotic relationship between patriotism and leadership and development. So that these leaders set the agenda. Dennis, it was in 1920, maybe 1920, I think, that you had the Fernando Po crisis. I hope I'm not wrong on that. If I'm wrong, I'll come back on the next show and give you the right date. So you had the Fernando Po crisis. These were leaders that carried out this heinous act. And so, Ahmed talked about some historical aspects. So if you go back into history, these things didn't just start now. There's a history to everything that you see now. So this is the reason why there has to be a place where we can begin anew. We can then say, we're starting again. Let's turn the page. Let's turn a new leaf. So I hope that there will come a time where we can begin anew.
Mr. Saleh?
Yeah, that two threads I will pick from the call, Mr. Eastman hit on something that I started, the question of virtue, integrity, and morality. That is very sickening. That it's sort of if we can disabuse ourselves of the way we carry ourselves, we do things without any compunction, without any iota of the regrets that this is immoral. This is, and we be Christian, Muslim, yet we do it. We fight in the mosque, we fight in the church, we fight over leadership there. We do things that are very, very corrupt and immoral, and that is, it comes from a place where it's historical, where people don't see any wrongdoing as exploitation of sudden. That's one. The second thing, I think it was call from Philadelphia, Abdullah, who mentioned Jawan Gonglo. I want to pick up on that. I followed this man over the years. Now I don't know him personally or closely, but things he says, things he does, these are these are signs of patriotism. These are signs of someone who sees a problem or problems with his society and says, listen, we have to sacrifice and rid ourselves of these problems. He speaks of corruption. The symbol is political symbol is the broom, right? That you have to sweep evil out of here, corruption out of here, ineptitude out of here, poor governance out of here. Now, if you multiply that individual 100-fold, so several thousands, you're having a society that is beginning to make painful decisions to start anew, to turn things around, to reorient the young people, to begin to make difficult policy or political decisions that may hurt friends and families, but yet you're doing it for the sake of the country.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take three more callers, and where we go next is how to now use patriotism for nation building. Based on patriotism, how can we build like, if it is not there, how can we imbue these values of patriotism to help build this country? But let me take a few callers here. The first is I will focus on Liberia guy here, Mr. Jefferson Toba. Jeff?
Yes. Good evening, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
I'm very glad. I'm very glad with the topic, and I think on a very holistic view, Liberians are very patriotic. But the law is being governed by those who the Liberian gives power to. And like many times we give examples, say America. If you are alleged today in America, the law go after you for investigation. On the contrary, in Liberia, it does not do that. The little people have been prosecuted to the fullest. Take for example, American at one point in time, the president said she would put a net on traffic pole, she would walk behind it and die. With all quality investigation, if they are calling investigation, there's no conclusion to the investigation. So those things give example to rampant corruption and unpatrioticness in government. So other people equal to see how they can treat other people from public work and other resources. So I think generally Liberians are very much patriotic, and like many families say, the culture, the churches teach us the morals to be good, but when we get out there, because we don't see what the leader practice, so we join bench welcome. But on general note, they are all patriotic. But how does the law treat them, and how does the law go after people who are corrupt? That's the challenge we have.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Let me go to Mr. Kesali Dovo.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chad, for the topic. And let me say thank the panelists on the platform. And a big thanks to Mr. Sheriff for laying out the definition, for patriotism. The definition was actually decent. And like he stated, the reason why Liberia for us, we are actually suffering and we really do not want to use the definition of the word patriotism is because it's not we are not patriotic like he stated. Our problem is with leadership, government. Most of the time, like even the moment we enter government, I don't know as to what's going on in that area. You change completely, and you change in a way that you don't change for the better, you change for the negative, right?
Right.
You change for the negative, and the first thing I would say for Liberians is that most time when you live in a government setting, you live patriotically, you live a better life. And you come from there, you look at a fool, but the person is going to laugh at you.
look at you. All the time you been government, you come from government, look how you still look like a beggar. Like for example, you say more part. When you say you were living on low, you were more, I mean, what the president put in more here. You were vice president for 12 years. You come from government, telling us that you don't have this, you don't have that. So as a result of that, some people now, they are moved by the pressure. When they get into government, they don't want to come from government, and then people start playing more all of them, telling them that you live in government, and they just join the bad weather and go on. So if we can have the leader who will set the pace, I bet you will get a little better side of Liberian, and you get a little better side of country like you. Liberian, you can find decent people who just need a good head who will set our pace for us to follow the up with you right now.
Thank you. Let me take the last caller here, and that will be our man William King, focus on Liberia, FOL marketplace guy. William, you're live.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the panelists. This is a very great topic, something that leaves a lot to think about. What I wanted to add was, patriotism is something that's critical to our nation. And I think it is in the context of Liberia, I think it would be best exemplified when there's justice. I think that's something that we as a nation have to really work on. Because even in foreign countries, even if you look at Singapore and other places, people, they have a sense of patriotism, but you also have some bad actors. And whenever those bad actors they do something that's bad, there's the arm of justice there to, put it in check. The other thing lastly is what Mr. Ahmed mentioned about the whole attire, right? The dressing attire and different things. Liberia is very unique. We have a unique culture that has evolved, and we are unique in that we consist of indigenous people, African Americans, people from the West Indies. So we did big melting pot. Some people ancestry is from Nigeria, so all over. So in that uniqueness, it's celebrated in sometimes the way that we dress. So I think we need to maybe embrace that sort of a diversity, that we're not just a unique identifier, but we should encourage and make things available, resources, so that the various cultures are able to showcase that diversity. I think that's something that we should do better on. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And that will be our last caller here. So let me read a few comments, and then I'll bring you in again to comment before we go to our last section. Mohammed Sisi says, poverty does not understand moral values and integrity, and today in Liberia, poverty is the order of the day. This is, I think what Mohammed is saying is, because of poverty, those values are eroding. Willie Hinen, today our question is, when exactly should Liberia begin to change in all aspects, and who should take the lead? Wisdom, kindness, we can rally around freedom and justice for all without discrimination. The settler group just added to the tribal indifferences. Let's rally around values and virtues with the idea of promoting Liberia first and foremost. We must teach virtue. Dave just said the noisy and incompetent ones are the ones that are mostly the ones in government.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Brown, Dennis, to be patriotic comes with a heavy price in Liberia. We don't value patriotism. What we uphold is patronage. And that's a word that he introduced there. Sam said this before. Norris J said the CDC government is not inclusive. They are afraid of losing their job. Maybe he's giving an example of not being patriotic. Masa Colley, most Liberians are not patriotic, especially my brothers and sisters from Vanjiman district. All right.
Come on, Masa, what are you doing?
Yeah, what do you people from Vanjiman district?
I'm not patriotic from Vanjiman.
Hamilton's daily patriotism creates a sense of belonging, a common identity, and a strong desire to participate in the national agenda. Examples: arts and culture, citizen civic responsibilities, and an unflinching love for one's country. Sam Waller, keep it simple on patriotism. I was in Morocco in November, visited 6 major cities. There were Moroccan flags everywhere. Went to Liberia in March of 2022, visited Monrovia and upcountry. I hardly saw any Liberian flag. The few I saw were badly faded. On many, the blue looked purple, red looked pink, and white looked tan. The nicest flag I saw was at the headquarters of a major concession company. The flag is even flown with pride.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to Swap Mapu, exactly too, Mr. Kuni, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't support a government that is so reckless, then come on this panel and talk about patriotism. How is that patriotic? Somebody is laughing. And to the flag issue, Dave said maybe because of the flag does not reflect us. Maybe the people are so poor that they cannot afford a flag. Let me start with Mr. Salif on the question and comments. You'll respond for 1 minute.
Well, I mean, the questions, first of all, thank you, listeners and viewers, for your contributions. They're very substantive. The one about, I think it was Hamilton Zilli, about, the various identifiers of or indicators of patriotism we've been discussing there, arts and culture, civic responsibility, involvement in the affairs of your country. That's citizenship is really talking about citizenship responsibilities and rights. And there are those who also have alluded to the fact. Listen, earlier when I said syncretic, hybrid, those words I was using, yes, we're unique. That's what I think Williams was talking about. That we come from different places. We are of different nations. Returnees to Liberia from the West Indies, like you said, from in the Carolinas, Virginia, other parts of America, and then even the various Liberian nations that were on the land that these people met. They were of different ethnic variations. And so we can't just say they have one single cultural identifier. I take that. I think that's really besides the point, right? I get it. Liberians are very good natured people. If you met a Liberian in a foreign country and they were the only Liberian, I went to Uganda, for example. I met this lady who they said was the consul general of Liberian who had lived in that country for over 30 years. See how she welcomed me and sought out other Liberian students at the university and places and gathered them and hosted a dinner for me. The Liberians are like that. Our food that we crave, that we enjoy so much, even though sometimes it's food that's really dangerous to our diet and things like that. But all of those speak of our diversity, the type of diet we have, the various kinds of delicacies that we enjoy, our cultural fabric and the songs and the different shapes and variation of Liberians. And you see the languages we speak. Uh, we're not criticizing any of that. If I have said anything that suggests any of that, then it's totally a fault of my own. I recognize that. I think it was Cole who said on the History Channel that, people are saying Liberian, there's nothing in Liberia, there's nothing in Liberia, there's something in Liberia. Of course, there's something in Liberia. I tell my children, I say, Liberia is a whole country. You can't just say, oh, well, what about this? What about this? The country is the people, right? So there's a lot in Liberia. There's always been things in Liberia, and Liberia has contributed significantly to many global organizations. The question is, what have we done to build on those things? What are we doing to maintain that diversity, but within that diversity, that we can show honesty, we can show virtues and morality and responsibility and citizenship and truly work and build our country? Right? You have somebody, for example, who will work in government and corrupt and steals money and builds mansions, but the road to that mansion is terrible, and they don't have electricity. They don't have water running. They have to put some poly tank on top of their home. They have to have various generators running up and down. Why is that? Can't you see? You're not rich, you're not happy, you're poor because you haven't contributed to the larger society to make it better so you can be better and happy. So I think that what you hear in the comments are all reflection of these various points that we've made here tonight.
Thank you. And Mr. Saleh will be the one speaking to those comments. The last question here is on nation building. We talk about patriotism, and all we are gearing towards is patriotism, as somebody said, the offshoot of that is nation building, is the product. Out of patriotism, you have nation. So we cannot build Liberia without patriotism. Is this where we are stuck on what we do here? How do we build Liberia now? How does a nation like Liberia now, or how can we build if there's no patriotism? So what do we do at this point? Let me start with Mr. Coney. The way forward.
Well, this is where we are stuck. The way forward, because as we all indicated, patriotism is that love of country that will make you put the country above your own personal desires. And if you do that, if you sincerely do that, it will inhibit you from doing certain things that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to pillage the national coffers. Not only pillaging of the national coffers, if you have the opportunity to sit across the table to discuss things about Liberia that affect Liberia, you will be fully aware to put Liberia interests first. So besides pillaging the national coffers, what about the kind of concession agreements that we sign in the name of our republic? The so-called foreign investors we bring in the country that take away, take advantage of the Liberian people through the kind of investment contracts that we sign. These are all things that inhibit development in our country. And if you love your country, those are things that you don't do. Because once you sit at that table, everything there is Liberia. That what you drive your decision making, that what you drive your analysis, that what you drive your negotiation. So besides the pillaging of the national coffers, we go to all of these concession agreements. We can build Liberia if we don't get the full benefit of our resources. If we continue to give 25 years tax exempt status to a hotel that employ only 5 to 10 Liberians who are kitchen staff, what is the tax revenue from that hotel? For which we give, there is economics of tax revenue. When you give tax revenue to an entity, you are calculating that that entity is going to employ a certain number of your citizens who will earn certain amount of money, and the taxes that you will generate from their salary and wages will offset the tax break that you give to the entity. So you give 25 years to a hotel. All of these decisions. Look at all of the 15-year, 25 years agreement that we've signed. We can develop the country if we engage in these activities that rob the country of its revenue. Look at the use of our even duty-free privileges to government officials. Duty-free privileges, how it is being abused by officials of our government. Not this government alone, but previous government.
Thank you.
Long before the introduction of the cell phone, you could also imagine how that line, what they used to call international line, how it was abused. So even the little privileges that are supposed to help us do our work, we abuse these privileges, rob our country of needed revenue, and so we stop. We continue to wait for the international community. Even a little piece of road, we have to wait for international community. We call them developmental partners. They got to bring this money. It took us 10 years to build a $60 million airport. The Republic of Liberia could not generate $10 million on its own. Now you find roads sitting throughout the country, and all we're waiting for is international partners. And you will agree with me, if we close the leakages in our government, we would not be sitting there waiting for the Arab Bank or the ECOWAS Bank to build the roads that go to a certain part of our country.
Thank you, Mr. Kune.
This is where patriotism come about. This is where love of country come about. And if we don't have it, we will be in this perpetual statement of underdevelopment and continuously crying to development partners to take us out of the hellhole.
Thank you. You could see that, and Dave agree with you. Say you are strong here, Mr. Kune.
What?
If you look at the Temple of Justice, they were showing. I mean, right before the Temple of Justice, and these politicians were coming in with their luxurious cars. and you see the potholes everywhere.
Mm.
And what does it take to just bring mud
That's
and
what I'm
put it here?
talking about. They
Yeah.
have the vehicles, they don't have the roads for. They build the fancy houses and everything. Something happens, somebody drops, there's no hospital, there's
Yeah.
no, it's a total misunderstanding of success.
So Francis C. Wilson is a patriotism is taught, has our values, has our manners. We do not like or respect one another anymore. All that Mr. Salif is saying, we were. We are not today, but we can and will be again. That,
How?
that's hopeful. And Mr. Cooney, I must admit, we know you are CDC Pape, but here you show that you have a grasp of economics. You said you talk about the economy of tax revenue. You also listed some wines
What
that
do
I
you take
never,
Mr. Cooney for?
yeah, you listed some wines that I never heard of before. So I
You
was
know,
beginning to say, well,
you
this
know,
is a bourgeois, some elite culture here going on.
the man fooling us, but he's a bourgeois. The man is well educated. He's a bourgeois. It's a
So, Mr.
bourgeoisie.
Sharif, how
He's
do
a
we move
bourgeois.
forward? How do we move forward with this nation building thing? If all I've heard from you today is we're really not there when it comes to patriotism, our leaders are not setting the stage for it, and also even the values that we learn, living in Kilipo or in Duazon, they all dissipate when we get into government and we
Yeah,
begin business as usual.
yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this sort of symbiotic relationship, right? So you can't divorce, patriotism from national development, and you cannot develop nationally if you're not patriotic. Is very difficult to do. So let's go back to I mentioned the 1920s. A lot happened in the 1920s, beginning with 1926, when the Firestone Agreement was signed, right? So you give a foreign company all these amenities, all of this for how much? Not much, right? 99-year concession agreement. That was unpatriotic, right? You build on that, and then you go into the late 1920s, 29 to 1930, the Fernando Poe crisis, emerged as a real national, international issue. And so every administration after that, with the exception of a few period in the late 70s, every administration after that has actually been building on, this sort of, just caving to big companies, right? It's very unpatriotic, and that's at the national level. So at the top level of the leadership ladder, there is no patriotism. So what do you think the ordinary people are going to do? So your question is, what
Yeah.
is the solution? What do we
Right. What do we
want?
do
So
quickly?
it has to be, for example, a national effort. Let's look at litter, for example. People litter everywhere. They throw plastic bags everywhere. People, excrements are thrown everywhere in Monrovia. The government can do something. You know, Public relations is one of those things. But if you tell me not to litter, if you tell me not to put my trash in a certain place, you better be sure that you also have a plan in place where, you have a trash pickup plan in place where you can dispose of your trash and waste. There is not such a thing in place, I don't think. And so therein lies the problem. Even though there's a need and all of these things should happen, public relations campaign. And don't forget, I think it was Admiral who mentioned that, inherently we as human beings, we would like to do things that may not be legal. So there has to be the legal enforcement to make people to do what they don't want to do, right? So if you violate, if you litter, there has to be a fine, right? If you just throw trash in the street and you're arrested, there has to be a fine, or you
So
go to
it
jail.
boils down back to the government.
So it goes back to the government. It goes back to the leadership.
Thank you.
Corruption cannot be this enticing. People cannot be paid this well, living lavishly in the public sector. That cannot be the order of the day. I would tell you, Dennis, I will submit to you, Liberia is never going to be developed If this public sector remains the way it is, the highly paid sector anywhere in the world, perhaps arguably, right? Our speaker is highly paid, better paid than Speaker Pelosi, which doesn't make any sense at all. So let's start there. Those are the things that, you cannot tell me that you are patriotic. You come to America and you beg for money, and yet your speaker is highly paid, is better paid than the country that you are asking for assistance. What sense does that make? What sense does it make that the president who has just come into office, he's already wealthy? He's a wealthy man already. We saw
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Shea.
Obama, after 8 years, he wanted to write books and stuff like that. So now, he's speaking. So, he gets paid to speak. But our presidents get into office, the first place they go is the national coffers. They want to make sure that they empty the national coffers before their term is up. That is very unpatriotic. You do all of those things, the country is never going to develop. So, like Larry Tukba said, our foreign policy is based on begging, and our national policy is based on theft. And this is where we are. We have to change our mentality.
Thank you. Quickly, let me put on the comment of Mayfi Deco, and then we go to our Tabata session. Mayfi Deco said the way forward, you guys, the way forward is to elect the likes of Joseph Newman Boakai, Abraham Darius DeLong, just to name the two I could lay my hands on for now. That's patriotism for him. Now, I know the time is fast spent. We should be closing now, but we can't close there without going around the room for the Tabata of the week. Mr. Salif, you start.
Yeah, I will start, Dennis, and it'll be my last comment. My son is performing tonight in the band.
Yeah, sure.
I'm at that event, so I gotta go. It's about to start. And I want to thank you for this very spirited conversation. I think it was a very appropriate topic. I hope we try our best to do justice to it. I don't know everything and that I've talked about. There are some things, and also if I said things that I need to correct, I'm happy to come back to at some point. I will talk about, that Mr. Gonglo name that came up. I listened to that man speak. Oh, this is Tabata session. This is not.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just going to talk about that rule of law as a solution. When people were speaking, that's what I was thinking. But the Tabata that I will leave you with, I saw pictures of our embassy in Washington, D.C. Right? This is any country in the world. The diplomatic number one prime diplomatic mission that they cherish, that they make sure that everything goes right with, is in Washington, D.C. And our embassy is sitting, if the photographs we've been seeing that's been making the trending on social media is true, this is a shame. This is a shame. What does that speak of us? It's not enough for us to live in filth in our own country, but we also actually exemplify that in a foreign country, in the most powerful foreign country, where we should be projecting ourselves in the most positive way and trying to get the most positive attention to our country, to our government. This is where we are not able to maintain our embassy, the physical real estate of the embassy ground. We're not able to maintain it, to sort of keep it clean and nice, so that when people come to visit our embassy and they try to make contact with our government, they have a positive impression. I think that is just a tabata. Something has to be done about it. It's a shame. And thank you. I have to sign off. I got to run.
Thank you so much, Mr. Conan. Your tabata of the week.
I got a lot of tabata, but I would just take the one. I was reading something about the opening of the circuit court in Lofa County, and the presiding judge made a point that the entire county, the judges in the local areas, they got absolutely no benefit, no protection, no vehicle, nothing. In fact, the entire court system in Lofa County got only 2 public defenders for a population of almost 235,000 Liberians. And this code is supposed to provide justice for Liberians. I know sometimes when you say when you come to the decentralization, you lost me. But these are the kind of powers that are concentrated in Monrovia. Contrast that to judges that are in Monrovia. They got vehicles, they got security, they got everything. All the lawyers are there. And you get a big county like Lofa. 2 public defenders in the entire county. 235,000 people. I think that's it. They not only Tabata, but that Tabata justice right there for the people of Lofa.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif.
Yes, my topic of the week has to do with the whole issue with Alexander Cummings. So Alexander Cummings has been, prosecuted for tampering, whatever is going on with him. At the same time, we have all these other issues that's not been touched. The election magistrate in Grand Jita just disappeared early this month, and the government is doing absolutely nothing about that. It's a shame. It's a shame. It's a big topic. And yet, this whole Cummings trial is just, everybody is fascinated with it. I mean, come on.
Thank you. We're just being joined by Focus on Liberia host
The
of
Bulldog.
Politics. That's the political bulldog, Mr. Anthony C., who is on a short vacation. He's been invited to participate in the inaugural program in Phoenix, Arizona of Mr. Steve Bullock. Mr. C., welcome to the show at the tail end.
Dennis, thank you. I've been listening throughout. Very hungry to come on. I must first say a very big thank you to the gentlemen tonight. They were solid. The topic, patriotism, is something that I care about, and I think many Liberians do. Unfortunately, some Liberians don't even understand it. I will quickly say the chief political analyst of Focus on Liberia was who he's supposed to have been all this long. He was from the beginning, but then he lost it. Mr. Cooney, my respect for you remains unshakable. You performed tonight. The Focus on Liberia chief political analyst that I've known you to be is the person you were, tonight. And I want to say thank you for that. And so to Mr. Ameke Salif and our political analyst, Mr. Muhammad Sharif, you guys have been solid, and I want to commend you. I'm placing a little emphasis on Mr. Cooney because it's like this CDC thing was getting a little more of him.
But we're bringing him back. We're bringing him back.
Yeah.
We're bringing him back. He's coming back.
The first one is blinking.
I'm not going to take much of your time, but I enjoyed the discussion. I want to chime in a little bit on the issue of nation building, and then I'll come to my tabata. I'll be very brief. So, patriotism, you guys discuss it, and there's nothing I can add. But I want to chime in on nation building. If we are to build a nation, that must start with patriotism, and I like the way you lay it out, because if we are patriotic in our minds, then we can build. In other words, if we want to build this nation, we need to have the minds to do so. So how do we understand what do you know Liberia to be? How do we see Liberia in our minds? If we know that, if we understand that, then we will be able to build Liberia. So we can emphasize more about the values that can be instilled in us as citizens, through our, educational institution, and also from our family cycles, right? What is my father telling me about honesty? What is my mother telling me about honesty? The danger in lie, and I may lay it out. So these are more important values than just the education we get how to read and write, because those are the things that will remain with, or those are the things that will drive our decision making, and then we will bring that, to nation building. That way, I don't have to lie to somebody. I don't have to steal the government money that is intended to build that hand pump somewhere so that the child can get a safe drinking water. If we don't get there, then we can have all the money, but that money will land in the pockets of so many people. That has been the story, right? So then, Matabata, Dennis and I have been looking at the budget. I have not cried in a long time, Comrade Sharif, but I cry. This is not new, right? But I cry. I cry because I will say this: we have a bunch of people claiming to be natives, who, including myself, accuse some elite in the past of some being American Liberians, who deny all of us, a foundation that will give us the nation we can really be proud of. They are the one in charge, and these are the people who are stealing in this faction. And Tabata is the Ministry of Presidential Affairs gets 20 million as its budget. Now, that is just a ministry in the executive branch of government. Now we have the judiciary that is another branch of government. So just a ministry in one branch of the government gets more money than the entire branch of government, which is the judiciary. The judiciary branch of government is around 17 to 18 million as its allotment for the entire 12 months. But Joshua and Nathaniel Maggie, I don't know how many employees they have at our Ministry of Presidential Affairs, they get $20 million. How is that now the greatest Tabata on this earth? How can a single ministry within the government, right, can get more money than an entire branch of the government? Thank you, Dennis. You see, so this is why we're talking. And Mr. Cooney will agree with me, and I'll let him for him to chime in on this Tabata of mine. Ministry of Presidential Affairs gets 20 million, but the judiciary branch of government, I think, gets about 17 or 18 million. How is that not a Tabata?
Look at education, though.
Right?
Look at
agriculture, for example. Compare agricultural ministry budget with the Ministry of Presidential Affairs. Presidential Affairs is 20 million, and agriculture, when we have a bunch of hungry people in the country that we need to feed, when we need to start producing food for ourselves, then we have this government that is giving the Ministry of Agriculture 7 million, all right? And then the Ministry of Presidential Affairs gets 20 million. Then President Weah office, this is money that goes into his office, his pocket. He gets 5 million. And then the Ministry of Agriculture gets 7 million. So he just 2 million shy away from what is being given to an entire ministry.
Poor JFK, my God.
You see, and you look at the first lady there. The first lady is getting 700,000. Now we have Redemption Hospital. They give Redemption Hospital $120,000 for the operation to run the hospital. 120,000, but the first lady gets 700,000. That is about 500,000 more than what they've given to Redemption Hospital. Wow. Mr. Cooney, I know you support this government, but this Tabata here, I will allow you to respond.
You got no response.
Yeah.
I want to pick up from there. So we continue with the budget, and thank God we have the FOL here. He is gradually becoming our budget hawk. That's Mr. CA. We have the legislative branch, the legislature alone, 64 million. Of that, we have the speaker, 2 million, pro tem, 2 million. The entire judiciary, has Mr. CA stressed, is 18 million. And then you talk about the Zogos. So the guys that are supposed to do the drug enforcement, DEA, their budget is 406,000. Mr. Shabri, also will interest you that the EPA, that's the
Environmental Protection Agency.
The Environmental Protection Agency, that's their money. And then we all talk about the Rabat International Airport, right? The LAA, the entire budget for the country for the year is 1 million.
This is a joke. It's a joke.
So, and then come to our police. You're talking about the ritualistic kill, or not ritualistic, or people are getting lost and all that. Let's look at our security sector. So, the NSA alone, NSA, Mr. Cooney knows about that more. They have 11 million. Then the EPS, the people that protect the president and his family, 10 million. And then you talk about the Liberia National Police, the entire police force, 5 million. So when it comes to the police, so talking about that, my Tabata is, where is the outrage from our politicians, especially the disintegrated CPP political leaders. Where's the
I know you
outrage?
wanted me to say something.
And they are busy tearing each other down at we ask court. To me, ignoring these things and outdoing each other on some bad document that they wrote in the first place, and that's what is taking them the whole year. Their whole focus is on that, and they are leaving the issue that Liberians care about. I believe that's the tabata of the week.
Yeah.
Mr. Kuni, nobody respond to other people tabata. So what you want to say? Go ahead, sir.
This is elaborate. This is elaborate. I want to thank you guys first of all. This is very elaborate.
You know,
And
go ahead.
Then I think Mr. Cooney should respond, especially now.
Hold on, Mr. Sierra. Mr. Sherry was saying something. Go ahead, Mr. Sherry.
no, I was saying this is elaborate, and you know, Anthony mentioned, you know, he cried, and look, we talk about patriotism. I know we all come on this show and try to be the analysts that we are. Try to be. At the end of the day, we're all humans. I'm human. We're all humans, right? And this is the kind of thing that if you're a true patriot, that Anthony is, that we all are, that you go home and start to wonder, where can we get hold of this? How can we get hold of this? What can we do? You know, I ask myself that question. What can I do?
Thank you, Mr.
What can I do as an individual?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's almost like, you know, this train has left the station. That's how I feel sometimes.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney.
So let me tell you what you can do as an individual, and then I will make my comment. As an individual, you can call your representative, you can call your senator. I mean, that's how the business is done in a democracy. I understand the numbers that have been revealed.
The senators are getting this kind of money. You think what are they going to do?
They got a raise. The legislators got a raise. Go ahead, Mr. Cooney.
I see the numbers. I see why somebody would look at the numbers and come up with different analysis. But those who understand budget, they tell us that we have to look at the historical documents of the budget, and sometimes we got to look at the explanation that is provided. Because if you see the explanation that is attached to the figures, you may still disagree, but you will have an understanding of the budget. I listened to the show when you discussed the security sector budget, and someone was giving the explanation for the National Security Agency budget, and they were giving us threats assessment of the country, threats assessment in the sub-region, and other issues. So maybe if you read the document that underline these numbers, it is possible that you may still hold your view. It is possible that you may change your view. But what is important also is that the budget is not a reflection of one person. We have our legislature that approved this budget. The legislature is dominated by the opposition. And I also think that they need to be held accountable for whatever is approved in the budget.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's my reaction to your tabata.
Thank you. So Mr. Cooney, you were saying you are in the security field, right? The NSA 11 million, the EPS 10 million, and LNP 5 million. What could be the explanation?
I don't want to disparage all of the numbers, but if just by looking at it physically, I would have loved to see more allotment to the Liberian National Police, because the LMP is the first line of defense when it comes to crime. Not only crime, but it is the first line of defense.
More allotment, meaning more than EPS, for instance?
More than what is being allotted. I would have loved to see more than what is being allotted to the Liberian National Police, because they are the.
Give me a number. Give me a number.
Well, let me give the reason first. Because the LMP is the first line of contact for crime, is the first line of contact for our citizens and then they have to also protect public peace, preserve order, and other things like that. So I would have loved to see a much more higher number
Like 7 million, 10
than
million,
what
20
is
million.
what is being allotted.
Thank you.
Especially in the area of training also, because training and law enforcement go hand in hand. I'm disappointed with the number that is allocated for training.
Yeah, this 5 million, everything is in there. Okay, let's go to from our viewers. The first Tabata here comes from Francis Wilson. He said, my Tabata is finding out that Coney and myself have something in common, and that is the palm wine. Softly, softly. And she calls that Tabata. I thought she was going to celebrate this having something in common, but she said that's Tabata. Sam Wallow, my Tabata is the inability of Liberians to focus on the positives in the country. There are a lot of positives in Liberia that are overlooked and ignored in favor of the negativity. More Tabata here.
Like the road construction in Grand Crew, the paving the capital city.
My Tabata of the week is a man who calls himself CEO bullying the panelists on his platform. All right. Thank you. And we also want to thank our viewers for watching. Let me see if I have some few announcements here to make. Tomorrow, join us for the literary hour. It comes your way every Friday at 6 p.m. You don't want to miss that. That's the literary hour. And also join me tomorrow when I sit with, no, Saturday when I sit with UK-based gospel artist Abina Jensen. Gentlemen, thank you for the show. Let's go around the room and get your closing comments. And let's start with Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, so patriotism is extremely important. It is the one of the, if not the most essential ingredient to national development. So you cannot have an overall national development without patriotism. So the expectation of national leaders has to be that, the infusion of patriotism along with whatever agenda that they may have. You don't get up one morning and say, hey, I'm just going to go out there and be patriotic today. This sort of thing, has to be ingrained. And you asked a question earlier, in our school system, civic is not even, I don't know if, civic is taught
Yeah.
well. People's civic education kids have to be taught. Honesty has to be taught, not just in our schools, but in our religious, in our places of worship, our imams and, preachers. They have to play a role in this. And of course, the national government, the judiciary, everyone has to play a role. But I would say this stuff is from top down. You mentioned, places where, citizens are proud of their country. You go to Nigeria, Ghana, or Guinea. That started with their national leaders. You go to Guinea, it started with Sekou Touré, who was very proud, who was a fierce, anti-imperialist. So he told the imperialists no. And so you go to Guinea, and the Guineans, will tell you this. They will tell you, they'll be quick to tell you, we're not afraid of imperialists. We're not afraid of white people. And they will say, this sort of thing. So these things, all I'm saying here is, to really, really set the agenda, to really, really set us on pace to be developed, it has to start with our national leaders. And if our national leaders are just busy stealing money, making themselves rich, enriching themselves, this thing is not going to work. Lastly, it's the opposition. We never talk, we didn't talk much about the opposition tonight. The opposition also have a role. Their role is that as the government in waiting to make sure that they also have a plan to develop the country. So you don't hear a lot of patriotism from them. So we need to hear them. We need their plans. They don't even, it looks like, they don't have a plan. I don't think they have, I don't know if they have a plan, to address some of the issues that we talk about tonight.
Thank you. One of them who boasted of a plan as a Kennedy Banfin, or what we saw was a to-do list. Mr. Cooney.
Let me just say this, Dennis, about Ben. I love Ben. Ben is very outspoken, But I think what Ben is trying to do is, Ben is lining himself up for the next job, the next, ambassador, the next, minister. And that's the problem with Liberian politicians.
Mr. Kuna, your closing comments, sir.
Dennis, not gonna
Dennis, I believe that patriotism, like other variables, like discipline, like respect, I believe that, yeah, there are instances where people are born with those kind of attributes, but they can also be taught. We can teach patriotism the same way we teach discipline, the same way we teach respect, the same way we teach other values to our citizens. And I really think we missed an historic opportunity at the end of the war, 2005. At the end of the war, we didn't make a national effort to educate our citizens as to some of the things that led the country to war. Things like corruption, things like patronage, things like nepotism, and how to love our country, things like tribalism. We didn't make a national decision to reorientate the minds of Liberians. So the population take off from war they just took off from, wherever the war ended. And every other negative behavior that was in existence that led to the war, and also that we learned from the war, now came together to define us as a people. Where, for example, there is no shame in stealing. There is no shame in being rude. There is no shame in destroying public property. There is no shame in being lawless. So this is where things are. And the way to go forward, for me, I'm really proposing, like you find in other countries, it's about time that we go back to teach civics, to teach citizen responsibility, not only in schools, but to also create this national service that will imbue some level of citizen responsibility in children, especially as they leave high school. Maybe a year of national service in which we would teach our students and the rest of the population as to what it means to be responsible citizens, to love our country, I think would be in order. Then the other thing the ordinary people can do, I understand people in leadership, they have a role to play, but people at the ordinary level, we should stop celebrating thieves. Let's stop making those who steal, let's stop making them Father of the Year. Let's stop inviting them as guest speakers. Let's create the campaign of public shame instead of this public accommodation that we've tolerated over the period. I think if we do a couple of those things, our country will begin on the right path to do some things right, show more love, not just in a mouth, but love that will actually lead to policies and actions that will better the people.
Thank you, sir. James Davis said, Matawata is love your neighbor as you love yourself in the God law. I don't understand, James. Sam Wallace said, Dennis, can you do a show a month on the positive of Liberia? And Sam, please make your suggestion. We hear this, a lot. People say, oh, you are talking about the negative. Let's talk about the positive. So if you can't do it here, you can drop me a line, some of your suggestions on the topic, and we can talk about that.
But people want to know about the positive. Grand Crew capital is being paved.
Right, and patriotism is the positive, right? If we patriotic, we build a country. So I don't. Yeah. That's why I don't understand it.
I don't know why Sonny not laughing. His county capital is being paved. He's just serious.
Mr. C, your closing comments, sir.
Dennis, thank you. I think Mr. Cooney made some suggestions how to begin with this whole idea of patriotism. The history, he talked about that, how we messed out when we came from the war. Is very, very important that we did not engage in teaching civics, teaching good citizenship, rights and responsibility of the citizen. So that's a missed opportunity. And I'm not sure if our national government is looking in that regard. If they are, then that's a good thing. But this is where we can start from our community organizations, media platforms as well. Citizens, families, let begin to identify individuals who have carried themselves very well. we should stop inviting people because either the person, has so much money. Because chances are that if a Liberian in Liberia working in government is rich, that person is a thief. All right. So let us start identifying individuals. Let's look at man Dennis Job, for example. And not because I know him. How many person will invite Dennis Job to a program to be a guest speaker? Or because they don't see him to be somebody that has money, right? But this is a man who built a platform that any Liberian, whether they disagree with Dennis Job, can be proud of because of the substance that you see here. All right. So there where we can start. Let's look in the school system. Is there a teacher who is committed, who is on time? Can the school recognize that teacher? Can that teacher get an award for that? Is there somebody in a church who sweeps the floor, who cleans the bathroom, even though he does not wear the best clothes? Can that person be recognized in that church? But it's the opposite. The minister who was wearing slippers in our church now is a minister of government, all right? And making the biggest donation is the person who is the father of the year. So instead of us, averting the trends of promoting thievery, bad behavior, and also, trying to elevate good behavior, which is actually the patriotism, we are not doing that. I think when we begin our communities by identifying the individuals who are our best examples in terms of character, in terms of reputation, in terms of good examples, and some leaders too, then we will be getting somewhere, and that will be my closing.
Thank you. And this is very important. Let me mention, Sam Wallace said the positive will be the many good things happening in multiple areas within the country that people and organizations are doing. And Sam, we are doing that. We have our Lady Piso and her friend who have won Zogos. Now they are home and we continue to showcase them. We have Jesslyn just yesterday, a young Liberian talent coming up. We also have the MCSS school superintendent, Mr. Professor Isaac C. Zaglo, who's doing very well with the MCSS school system. I mean, they are very good things that they are doing. We had him yesterday. We also have the Liberian Chamber of Commerce and May in Liberia. They are coming together to have a Liberian Business Expo right here in Lawrenceville. So these are some of the things that we are doing. So before we close, I want to take a short break to play something that maybe this is some form of patriotism. I don't know, but take a listen. On that note,
yeah, man, our dancing man.
I want to say thank you, everyone. If that doesn't move you, then I don't know what will. That's the band that all Liberians, regardless of where you come from, that we all dance to. And that would be the better place, a way to end the show tonight. Thank you again,
And,
gentlemen.
and Dennis, quickly, let me remind Sam Wallow, Focus on Liberia is the only Liberian media institution that ends with something every broadcast that is nationalistic and patriotic, right? That is our closing song. We are all Liberians. Whether we criticize the government, the opposition, at the end of the day, we play that song. We are all Liberians. Only Focus on Liberia does that. So when it comes to patriotism, nation building, we are the number one example that I know. Thank you.
And with that, we end the song that says, whether you are Kru, Crown, Gribble, Mandingo, Loma, Bele, we are all Liberians. Whether you are from the elite class or the downtrodden masses, we are all Liberians.
You're talking about the CDC, intelligentsia elite?
We are all Liberians, and that's the message. Let us do whatever it takes to make our country the glorious land of liberty. Good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberians.